Hello, everybody, and welcome in to the Bama Preps playoff preview for Class 7A. I'm Vlad Valasuk, and I'm joined by our chief content contributor, former writer of the Auburn Plainsman and Sports Illustrated, TP Hammock. TP, what's going on, man?
Not much. Just ready to talk about some playoff football, Vlad.
Absolutely. And we're going to be starting off in this Class 7A bracket, going over all 8 games going on this upcoming Friday night. We've got a few rematches. We've got a few first time ever matchups, some new region champions. So we'll start off with it all. This first matchup that I want to touch on, TP, is one that has been highly anticipated for both of these teams coming off of last season. Hoover and Central Phoenix City played in the state semifinals for the 2024 season, with Phoenix City winning that game 17-7. This time around, they match up in the first round. Now, the paths for both of these teams have been quite dissimilar. Hoover, who started off the year 1-3, rattled off 5 straight wins over Prattville, Parker, Oak Mountain, Tuscaloosa County, and finished it off against former number 1 overall team in 7A Thompson off of a 55-yard game-winning field goal. But recently, struggling against Vestavia Hills, losing 39-30. On the other hand, Central of Phoenix City has started off the year hot and really didn't cool down. Both teams have losses to IMG Academy in this one, and Phoenix City comes in off of a 9-1 regular season. Now, TP, this is one, like I mentioned, pretty highly anticipated matchup. You look at Hoover, you look at what they have offensively with CJ Calley, with JR Mosley, really good 1-2 punch in the backfield. You really feel like the quarterback situation has come along as the year has progressed. I think Caleb Freeman has become much more comfortable in that role, moving up from Pleasant Grove to being at 7A, the pinnacle of high school football in Alabama. And you look on the other hand, Bobby Coleman Jr. and the plethora of receivers that he's had at Central of Phoenix City. You look at Jay-Sean Woodhouse, who has stepped in the role as the lead running back. And you look at this Phoenix City defense. I mean, it's been absolutely elite this season. You look at the look up at the point totals that they've allowed. You look at that 36-0 win over Auburn. How heated of a rivalry game is that? So, and with the way these playoff is formatted right now, you could very well see Phoenix City and Auburn match up in the state title if all things work themselves out. But overall in this one, TP, what are your thoughts? What are your predictions? This is a pick'ems game for us this week. Is this a pick'ems game?
Yeah,
This is a pick'ems game for this week. So, what are your overall thoughts of this Hoover Phoenix City matchup?
yeah. I think Central Phoenix City's just been phenomenal this year.
Absolutely.
Not many teams have been able to crack the code except for IMG, IMG Academy. So the number 2 ranked team in the nation. Um, if you look at how Central Phoenix City has done in region play, you can see that they've only given up more than 6 points one time in region play, and that was against Carver Montgomery. So it's not just Bobby Coleman; it's also their defense that has been phenomenal. So they're a really hard team to beat, and Hoover's very good. Hoover's one of the hottest teams in the state. I know they lost to Vestavia. Vestavia played a phenomenal football game, played about as good as you could. Got that victory there, big one. But I think Hoover drew the small straw on this one, and we get a state semifinal rematch, one that was played in Phoenix City last year, ended 17-7. I don't think it'll be as defensively locked down, but I do expect the same outcome, and that is a Red Devil victory, Vlad.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree with you. And David Parker of the AHS FHS actually brought out a pretty interesting stat, that being that Hoover has won, I think, 27 straight first round or 27 consecutive first round playoff games, dating all the way back to what would that be, 97, 98? Very, very impressive for Hoover. And I would reason to bet this is probably going to be the toughest one yet for them as far as first round matchups go, because they get to face probably the best team in the state of Alabama. And we'll get into that as we move on. Speaking of best teams in the state of Alabama, nobody has been able to replicate what the Thompson Warriors and head coach Mark Freeman have been able to do since 2019. They've now won, what is it, 5 or 6 state championships in the past 8 years? Am I getting that right? 2019, 20, 21, 22, lost in 23 to Phoenix City, won it in 24, so that's 5 and 7 years if you're going to count the 2018 season. And they're going for another one here. But in my opinion, this is a Thompson team that has shown some nicks in the armor, maybe. I don't know if it's just defensive turnover kind of finally getting to them. We were at a few of those games. They looked pretty slow against Carver in the first half, really figured it out there at the end, and then you go to the Clay Chalkville game, a game in which they lost. It just seemed like the Thompson offense at times struggled to find its footing. And naturally, I will be a little bit more critical of Thompson. I did go there, so it's just kind of in my nature a little bit. But I think that this will be a Thompson victory in the first round against Carver Montgomery, just as it was in week one. We have to remember this game will be played in the same location against the same team as it was in week one for Thompson. And I believe that one ended 31-6. Or 37-6, excuse me, but that game was 6-6 at halftime. So Carver Montgomery's looked good. Definitely a much improved season. And I definitely want you to touch on Mario White and the job he's done, but I'll speak on that Phoenix City game. They looked good in that first quarter offensively. They were able to establish a running game. We'll have to see if they can do it against Thompson.
Yeah, Carver's very talented. Zion Crumpton and crew, they're very good. It's not it's not a talent problem. They just it feels like whenever they've been in these big games, they have turned over the ball way more than
Yeah.
they ever should. And they aren't like great, peanut Tillman punches, they are, very easy corrected mistakes. So, um, this is a tough matchup for Carver. I know it's hard to beat a team twice. I'm a big believer in that. It is really difficult to beat a team twice.
Yep.
But Carver is just so 50-50 with what we get. And Thompson, albeit I don't think this is the best Thompson team ever, I do think they're still a very good team. And I know what I'm getting with them, especially in November. And I can't say the same for Carver. So I think we'll probably have a pretty similar outcome than we did back on that first, what was it? It was like the third week of August, that Thursday night. I think it'll be probably pretty similar. Maybe some more points for Carver, but I don't think it'll be that close.
Yeah, no doubt they're going to bring their A game in that football game. I think Mario White's done such a great job here in year one. You look at, where he came from, just being a head coach at Pike Liberal Arts and having to move up all the way to Class 7A, very similar to what Bobby Carr had to do last season. Coming from all the academy schools around the Montgomery, Autauga County area. Now, obviously, he's at Prattville, but Carver's the one that makes the playoffs. So we'll have to see if they can flip the scales a little bit in that game. And you're right about the turnovers. I go back to the Phoenix City game, which I attended, and that game was close until the turnovers started coming in for Carver. So if they can clean that up, we'll have to see if they have any chance against Thompson, and if it was anybody else, we'd definitely be saying it'd be a closer matchup, but unfortunately they did get Thompson in the first round. Now I want to move on to whoever wins that Thompson Carver game will have to play the winner of Austin and Mary G. Montgomery. Now, this has been a good year for both of these teams, especially MGM, and everything that they've been able to do over the past half decade now has been excellent. You never thought of MGM as being a school in really any sort of playoff or state title conversation, but they've absolutely eclipsed that this season. Good playmakers, good receivers, transfer quarterback coming in from St. Luke's, and I mean they've been as prominent as ever. One hiccup on the year, and that's a 43-28 loss to Baker. And then you go to Austin's side, and we're going to touch on Region 4 in depth in a few different ways. And one of those is obviously the big old monkey on their back, which is they can't win a playoff game. I think 2018 or 2017 was the last time we saw a Region 4 team win a playoff game. And you look now and look at Austin's chances against an MGM team that's probably going to be pretty pissed off about their loss to Baker. And this will have to be quite a travel for Austin. And I want to go ahead and bring this in, TP. The long road And we'll touch on a few of these matchups later on. We have Daphne traveling all the way up to Sparkman, 354 miles, 5 hours, 25 minutes. You can see it on the map. And then you look at Fairhope and James Clemens, 345 miles, 5 hours, 53 minutes, TP. I mean, where else could you go in a shorter amount of time than a playoff game? And what does this mean for the conversation around the 7A playoffs? You don't see this in any other classification. This is strictly a 7A thing with the reshuffling of the regions playing each other. What does this mean overall, and how tough of a drive is that for some of these schools?
Yeah, so we were just talking about the game in question of Mary Montgomery and Austin, and we don't have the graphic for that one, but I do have the information. That's around a 4 hour and 55 minute drive, 343 miles. So just a few short miles from these two that you see. If you're curious, so we use the baseline of the AHSAA headquarters, which are on Taylor Road in Montgomery, Alabama. So here are some places that are closer to go to, both time wise and mileage. So all of these are based around if you left the AHSAA headquarters. So you could go to New Orleans, for reference. You could go to New Orleans, Louisiana. You could also go to Memphis, Tennessee. Uh, Depending on one of these games, which will be the Sparkman game, or not the Sparkman, excuse me, the Baker Florence game. Some of these other ones will come into effect, but you can go literally to New Orleans, Louisiana, and you can go to Memphis within the time. It will be quicker for you to go from Montgomery to New Orleans, Louisiana. You can go on Bourbon Street, and it'll be quicker for
About that.
you than going to these games. I think that's just. I see what they're thinking. I mean, I know that Region 1 and Region 4 historically have struggled in the first round in Class 7A whenever they played Region 2 and Region 3. But at the end of the day, is it really worth it? I mean, you look at that bracket and, Thompson and Central, in all likelihood, are going to play in the semifinal. Now, I love all those teams on the other side of the bracket. I don't have anything wrong against y'all. But if you're a fan or a player of those teams, you probably acknowledge that Central Phoenix City and Thompson are number one and number two in the state. And there's no reason they should be playing in the state semifinals. So, and the bracket, we get these long drives. And Vlad, I don't know what the longest drive you made as a player. I know you guys played in Milton,
Yep,
Georgia,
that's right.
and, and I went down whenever I was a player. We played at Bayside Academy, which was a little over 3 hours. And I don't know what the longest bus ride you've made. Probably around that, if I had to guess.
Hmm.
Uh, but you know this, Vlad, and I'm sure the players know this. Those long bus rides, they suck.
They do suck.
That is, you know, you get tired. Some people, they nap. I was a napper on the buses. Or you listen to your music to try to stay locked in, which is fine. But at the end of the day, that is a 5 hour bus ride. That's 5 hours. You're just sitting there. You're not doing anything. Obviously, you're going to get off the bus to use the bathroom or eat. But at the end of the day, and then guess what? You have to go back after the game. So like, I think it's a very bad disadvantage for those teams traveling. And I know home field advantage should exist, but for you to go from up around the Tennessee border, the Tennessee state line, all the way down to the Mobile Bay, I think that's just ridiculous in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that. So we had the luxury. We played my senior year at Thompson. We played Buford High School in Milton, Georgia. It was a bowl game classified. I don't like just like a Go Gold Bowl or the Fight Breast Cancer Bowl, something like that. Just something you do at the start of the season to have a fun opponent for a good cause. And we had the luxury of staying in a hotel for that game. Now, that raises the question for these round one games, are you going to book a hotel for a round one playoff game? That it's a tough call, and any bus ride that I had is pales in comparison to what these are going to be. I was coming from Alabaster, Alabama. You go from Alabaster to what the longest bus ride for me was probably a 7-on-7 camp that we did down in Gulf Shores. That's only 3 hours. It's not that long, so it's interesting, but yeah, no, overall it's a question to be had. I know there's been discussions on whether or not, people should either reformat the playoffs again. We just did this a few years ago. It was announced that it would be a region versus region swap, but do you go through to a 1 through 16 system? And who does that guarantee into the playoffs? I know the state of Georgia and other states have done more of like a points like BCS esque system, if anybody remembers that. And then you got people being mad at computers instead of mad at the other teams. So it raises a bunch of questions. There were some really good teams that missed out on the playoffs this year. You look at Prattville, you look at Hillcrest Tuscaloosa, you look at Enterprise. You look at Dothan. Dothan didn't make the playoffs. Dothan looked like one of the top 16 teams in Class 7A this year. I think you'd agree with that. But with the current region system we have right now, it guarantees 4 spots for the teams up north. It guarantees 4 spots for Birmingham, the Montgomery area, and the Mobile area. So, discussion worth having. Not one we'll have too in depth right now. We'll save it for the offseason, TP. How does that sound?
Sounds like a good idea.
Absolutely. So now we will move on to the final game on the left side of the bracket, which is James Clemens High School versus Fairhope. Now, Fairhope had a pretty darn good year, TP. They finish out the regular season with only 3 losses, a big upgrade from what they had a year ago. And if you look at some of the games, an early loss to Spanish Fort, 17-7. That one doesn't look too good on the resume. Spanish Fort ended up missing the playoffs in Class 6A. Then they lose a 7-point game to Mary G. Montgomery, who ended up finishing second there in Region 1, and then a tough 35-10 loss against a surging Baker High School team. But you look at some of the wins that they've had, man, this team beat the crap out of Theodore, beat Daphne, who also made the playoffs. And then you look on the other side, which is James Clemens. They beat Gardendale. They called that one a loss due to a player ineligibility issue. They lose to Bob Jones 54-7. We were actually on location for that game, and hell, TPA, I thought Bob Jones was going to win the Super Bowl after that, but they had a bit of a tumble. They end up missing the playoffs. They beat Huntsville, Grissom, lost to Spain Park, lost to Florence, and then they knock off 3 in a row. One against the region champion Sparkman. They end up beating Austin. They beat Albertville. That ended up securing them into the playoffs, and then they lose to a really good Homewood team to end off their regular season. So you look at this bracket, you look at James Clemens and Fairhope. This team's going to have to play the winner of Central and Hoover. Juan Johnson's had a tough year, a tough year one for JC. But that's probably to be expected with how much Region 4 cannibalism we see nowadays. What's your opinion on this game? What's your prediction? I'll have to go Fairhope in this one. I think that they win it. I don't want to say handedly. I think JC's a good team. They've got really good running backs with Christian Ritchie and MJ Gideon. So they've got a really nice backfield. I think that can carry them in this game. But Fairhope's been a good football team this year.
Yeah, Fairhope's been pretty fun to watch. I've gotten to watch them play a few times on the NFHS. They're not bad at all, and I've gotten to watch a little bit of James Clemens, and I think they're just a little too inconsistent for my liking.
Yep.
And Fairhope, but this is the thing that we just go back to. I think Fairhope's the better team. I really do. Fairhope's a good team. They are very good. Region 1, the top part of Region 1 has been a fun one to watch. All 4 of those teams are really good. The bottom 4 are pretty bad, but the the top 4 are really good. So the thing is, though, Vlad, I think Fairhope is the better team, but we just showed the graphic. That is a long bus drive for the Pirates. I mean, you're looking at basically 6 hours. You're looking at a 6 hour bus ride. I mean, Central Phoenix City bust down from Phoenix City down to Orlando. And in that game against a team that I've seen the Orlando team, they weren't that good, to be honest with you. I thought Central was much better than them. Central in the first half came out flat.
Yep.
Who would have thought? They just bust 6.5 or 7 hours. So I think this one will be closer than people think, but I still think Fairhope will win. I just think they'll get off to a slow start, and I can't say I blame them.
Yeah. No. No, I mean, it's a really good point. We will move on now to the right side of the bracket, which you can see here, and that'll be this Daphne Sparkman matchup. Sparkman, after much controversy, ends up winning Region 4 out of nowhere, man. You look at the way
Just on
that
a
they
random Tuesday. On a random Tuesday, they
the
win it.
the
So
association decided to drop that one on us, and that was a fun morning. Let's talk about this Sparkman season. Me and CJ, CJ Gilbert from Unlock Your Game, were able to interview one of the Sparkman offensive coaches, and you look at the way that they started the year 0-3, losing to Spain Park, Hillcrest Tuscaloosa, and a tough region loss to Austin 29-7. They were able to flip the script a little bit, winning over Albertville and Huntsville, ended up losing to May Jemison before rattling off a win against Bob Jones, lose to James Clemens, as we just mentioned, and then they beat Grissom and the big one, Florence. And somehow that gets you a region title, TP Hammock. So they're here, and they're going to be in for, I think, has a chance to be one of the best opening playoff games against a really good Daphne program. One where Kenny King has righted the ship and gotten his guys back into the playoffs. You look at what's been going on the past few years. They've been first round exits last season, losing to Thompson. But they've had a pretty good year. Only losses are to Mary G. Montgomery and Fairhope, the two of the three teams which are above them in the region standings. So they beat McGill, they beat Pine Forest High School out of Florida, they beat Foley, they beat Baker, who are the region champs. That was a big one. They beat Spanish Fort, Davidson, Alma Bryant, and then they just finished off the year with a 60-13 win over Fairhope. This one could go either way, and this is going to be a pick'ems game for us, TP. I want to hear your opinion. Who is winning this football game? Which way are you leaning right now? This is a surging Sparkman team, but this is a Daphne team which has also shown continuous improvement over the year and have already picked up some pretty big football wins.
yeah, let me just talk about this for a second about Sparkman. Um, so in 3 years under Ronnie Watson, all 3 years they've gone 5-5. First year, 5-5, didn't make the playoffs. Last year, 5-5, didn't make the playoffs. This year, 5-5, win a region title. And
That's how it happens.
consistency is key. You know what? Just they say insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Well, someone tell Ronnie Watson that. It's not true to him. Okay. I, I, it goes back to travel about this, but you look at, it's gonna be another long bus ride for Daphne, but Sparkman, I mean, Vlad, this region is so dumb because Huntsville finished with the best record and they didn't even make the playoffs. I mean,
What was the tiebreaker? What was the original, like, how was it decided? Because it had to go down to whose shoelaces were tied the best. Like, like where did this end? Do you have any idea?
it's a long list, and we don't even have enough time to go down it because it is just the most confusing. I read into it for like an hour, and my brain melted because it was just so weird. Like, I mean, you can't lose a tiebreaker, and they all tied, and Sparkman, it was. It's so hard to explain. Just know that Sparkman won the region because they beat Florence. So
That's
just because they beat Florence. So
that's it.
uh,
Yep,
yeah, I
that's
mean
it.
it's a very confusing. But I think Daphne's gonna win. I do. I think Daphne's really good. Shout out to Coach King and crew.
Absolutely.
I think this is a good football team. They beat Robertsdale 60-13. They've played really well all season. And while I think they probably will start off a little slow just because of that travel, I don't think they'll have much of a problem with the Senators.
Yeah. No, it should be a good one. Like I mentioned previously, I'm gonna go with Daphne in that football game as well. That will end up being a pick'em for us. And we move down one slot in the bracket. Whoever wins the Daphne Sparkman game gets the privilege and the honor to play either Vestavia Hills or Auburn High School, an Auburn team that lost in the second round last season to Thompson, and a Vestavia Hills program that also lost in the second round last year. You look at this Vestavia team, beat Westside High School out of South Carolina in week one, and in week two, guess who they played? Auburn. This is a rematch, a non-region rematch. Vestavia Hills actually won this game very handedly, 42-14, and this is a game that I was able to attend. And TP, quite frankly, it was never really that close. Case and Myers and Auburn struggled early offensively, and I made the comment on the mark on iHeart the week after that game. It looks like they didn't get off the bus. That's tough. But they've won the games they've supposed to. Auburn has. They came back and beat Opelika the very next week. Then they beat Enterprise 23-7 and looked good all the way up till that Central Phoenix City game, like we mentioned in the Hoover Central preview, losing 36 to nothing. But I don't think we need to compare apples to oranges, and I think that Central Phoenix and basically everybody else is comparing apples to oranges. I don't even know if that metaphor makes sense, but I'm rolling with it. This is going to be a fun one. I think this is going to be closer than people expect. The only thing is, and I know you want to touch on this as well, what's going on with the Auburn quarterback situation. We've seen reports on injuries. I don't really want to touch on any specific injuries. That's not really what we do. But who will be the quarterback for Auburn is definitely a question mark. So we'll have to see how this one plays out. And really, for that reason, even though this game is going to be at Duck Sanford Stadium, I was at Vestavia Hills earlier in this year. I still think that this will be a Vestavia victory. They look like if one of, if not the hottest team in Class 7A. You look at their last five after that 35-3 loss to Thompson, beat Prattville 56-28, beat Oak Mountain 40-0, beat Tuscaloosa County 56-10, and then you beat Hoover 39-30, beat Montgomery Catholic, region champs in their own right in Class 5A, 40-13. Where are you at on this matchup, TP?
Yeah, I think it will be closer. I touched on it earlier. It's hard to beat a team twice,
Yes.
especially one that's very well coached by Coach Etheridge in Auburn. And Coach Evans has done a great job at Vestavia. Um, Happy to see that. But I think Vestavia is just better. At the end of the day, whenever you lay the chips on the table, who's got more dudes?
Yep.
And I think Vestavia Hills has more dudes than Auburn. And Auburn's done a good job of steering the ship after they got shut out by Central Phoenix City. But the win against Carver was impressive, and then they rallied to beat Dothan. But I think Vestavia Hills is much better than both of those teams. No offense, and I do think it'll be closer, but I'm going to make a little bit of prediction here. I have Vestavia Hills representing that side of the bracket. So I mean, I think they're very good, and I think they will make a very very short drive to Protective Stadium and represent that side of the bracket come early December.
Yeah, absolutely. And once we get into our state champion predictions, we will make sure to touch on that as well. A little news flash here. I think I have Vestavia as well. But we'll get there in due time. Next up, we have Florence making the trip down to Baker High School. Another one of these long, long drives that TP likes talking about. And for good reason, because they're egregious. But we won't go there. Baker, region champions, first year under head coach Eric Scott. Um, Man, what can you say? Great, great first year for them. The passing game has been humming all season. They picked up the wins when they've needed to. You look at their losses. Lost to Jackson with the super team down there in Class 4A. Xavier Crowell and Landon Duckworth and all those guys that make that team so well. You can write that one off. Now, Kenny King had them boys ready to play. They go over to Daphne and end up losing that game 34-20. Other than that, they've been perfect. And then you look at the stretch of the last 3 games for Baker. You want to talk about catching fire. 43-28 over Mayor G. Montgomery, 35-10 over Fairhope, and 21-12 over a really good and well defensively coached Viger team. This is they're getting hot in the right time, TP. And then on the other hand, Florence, who won 5 out of their last 6, beating Bob Jones, James Clemens, Grissom, Huntsville, losing to Sparkman, and then the big one, obviously in the last week of the regular season, beating Oxford 12-11. So it'll be a fun matchup on paper, in my opinion. We don't just want to keep picking the top seeds every time, but it's kind of tough here, just based off of how good Baker is. What are your opinions on this one, TP?
Baker's been a fun team to see. I think back in probably early to middle October, I think a lot of people had already penciled in their 7A Region 1. They had Mary Montgomery, Fairhope, Daphne, and then Baker. I think everyone was kind of on the same page in that, except for Baker and Eric Scott. They're like, we do not agree to these plans. So,
Absolutely not.
so
They
you know,
woke
they
up,
they
didn't
got
they?
they woke up after that bye week and they have just
Yeah.
beat teams bad.
Yeah.
And first region title since 1989.
There you
So
go.
been a
What were,
long
what
time
were
for the
you
Hornets.
what were you doing in 1989, TP?
I
Nothing.
was not. I'm about to say not alive. Far from it, actually. But shout out to Baker. I think they will win this game just because Florence has just been so inconsistent. I mean, up down, up down. Started off 1-3, rallied. Looked like they were going to win the region.
Mm-hmm.
Then they lose to Sparkman, and then they beat Oxford, who's not bad. So I think Baker's a much better team. No offense, Florence. I think they I think they aren't bad, but I think Baker's just better. And they also have the pleasure of hosting. So,
That's right.
that definitely helps out here. And Vlad, this is a good segue. I think Baker will win this game and is going to advance to the second round. And I think we might have a potential rematch of last year where we had a double overtime
That's right.
game between them and Hewitt Trussville.
TP Hammock with the segues, man. Of course, we have to talk about one of the most exciting games going on all the way down in the bottom right of the bracket. It's not where your eyes go first, but you definitely should be tuned in to this one. And that's, of course, Opelika making the trip northeast of Birmingham all the way up to Hewitt Trussville High School. And what a tale it has been for both of these programs. Hewitt Trussville rolling early in the season. And then an injury to starting quarterback Zach Benedict thrusted in Jack Floyd, the son of head coach Josh Floyd, and he went out and beat Hoover and beat Hillcrest Tuscaloosa, and man, they looked good until they ran into Thompson, losing that game 34-12, followed up by a 24-21 loss to a pretty dang good Prattville team this year, like missed the playoffs. And like I said, that's another discussion for that 1 through 16 seeding. But they end up rattling off 2 wins against Oak Mountain in Tuscaloosa County. You look at the weapons that they have. You look at Chris Davis the third. You look at DeVricio Alston at running back. You look at Dylan Cope at receiver. You've got Dante Seals on the edge. This is one of the most talented teams that Josh Floyd has had at Hewitt Trussville. And then you look on the other side with Opelika. That's a tough football team. Started off the year in a big way, beating eventual 6A region champs Benjamin Russell. Then they go to Callaway, Georgia, and end up beating them 36-35. They lose a close game against Auburn, and then they run into Enterprise in Phoenix City to end the year. I will say this, last year they ended up losing to Carver Montgomery in the last week of the regular season. They're able to flip the script on that one this year, winning that game 24-14. So Opelika comes in, you know, maybe not as hot, but I think you can say the same thing for Hewitt Trussville, and that's what makes this such an intriguing matchup. Like you said, potential rematch. Hewitt still has to beat Opelika, and that's no easy task. Opelika is a very well coached football team. They're a hard nosed football team. You know, a true pro style offense. You look at what Hewitt Trussville does, getting to the edges. They like to roll the quarterback out a lot. A very non traditional passing game, and they complement that with two really good running backs in the QB run as well. So you look at this matchup, and I think honestly it could go either way, and that's why it's a pick'em game for us. This one's going to be really fun. What are your thoughts on it, TP?
Yeah, I think this is going to be probably the closest game of the week. Maybe one of those Region 1 versus Region 4s might be closer, but I don't think so. I think this is going to be the cream of the crop right here between Opelika and Hewitt Trussville. Opelika's been a weird team, though, Vlad. You know, they started off big against Benjamin Russell, and they won that game. And they beat Callaway, Georgia, who's not a bad Georgia team, but at the end of the day, for those that aren't really familiar with how Georgia high school rankings kind of are, Callaway is kind of like a 4A for reference, and for Alabama standards, are a 2A in Georgia. And so that one was a little surprising. And then they lost to Auburn, and after the loss to Auburn, they kind of felt like they lost their mojo a little bit. Yeah, they took care of like Jag and Smith Station. They pulled one out against Pike Road,
Yeah.
but you know they got beat up by Enterprise, who didn't even make the playoffs.
Yep.
Didn't even really come close to making the playoffs. Felt like, and then they got smashed by Central Phoenix City, which happens, to be fair. And then they pulled one out against Carver Montgomery close. So like Opelika hasn't been as consistent as I thought they would be after week one. You know,
Yeah.
I thought they were going to be a really good football team, and you know the Auburn game. You know, they if they have their starting quarterback, they probably win that game, but they didn't at the end of the day. So I think defensively they're very very good, and so is Hewitt Trussville as well. Hewitt Trussville's defense is phenomenal to watch. So I don't know how many points will be scored in total. Maybe this could really be like a 13-10 football game. This really could be. And you know, Hewitt, you know, I've been ragging on Opelika a little bit, but Hewitt is not safe from scrutiny either. You know, they had the big game against Thompson and they didn't win. And they let Thompson beat them twice. Or Pratt will beat them the next week, you know. They had a little bit of a hangover game. You know, woe is me, woe is me. I've had one of those. We didn't lose, but we played a team that was very bad. And the first half, it was like 14-0. And you just wanted to be anywhere except for in that locker room. It was not an enjoyable experience. I'm sure you've had one of those games too after a loss. So that's what happened with Hewitt. And then they kind of rallied around. They beat Oak Mountain. They beat T County. But yeah, I don't see the points in this game being very high, and I really don't know who to pick. But I'm leaning Hewitt Trussville just because I think they're just a little bit better, just very subtly. But if I had to put a point spread on this one, I'd put it like 1 for Hewitt Trussville just because they're hosting. So very evenly matched, and I hope whoever wins gets to play. I think they'll have a really. I think the next round, if it is Baker, I think it'll be a fascinating matchup. Whoever wins this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get these fun matchups all on the right side of the bracket, with Vestavia and Auburn being in there, with Opelika, Hewitt, and Baker being in there. It's going to be fun to see who eventually advances to the state title game on December 3rd at Protective Stadium. Now, you were a little glass half empty on Opelika. I'm going to be a little glass half full here. I'll be the contrarian. Big win over Pike Road, who ended up being region champions. Big win over a Dothan team who's a pretty good team. 24-22, 21-14 in both of those games respectively. And when you want to look at the teams that they've played, both teams have played head to head, you come up with Jag. So not much to do there. But overall, I think this will be probably the most even matched game of these first round 7A matchups. You look at maybe Daphne and Sparkman, but you probably lean a little bit more Daphne there. This one is a true toss up, in my opinion. The game will be played in Trustville. It'll be a fun atmosphere. They've got a great atmosphere in Hewitt Trustville. So overall, excited for all of these first round matchup games. Now, TP, let's get into who our state title picks are. I want you to give me a team out of the left side of the bracket and a team out of the right side of the bracket, and then I will do the same. But I suspect we already have yours. So let's hear it.
Yeah, I got Central Phoenix City, shocking. And then on the right side, I allude to being Vestavia. And I think that is, I was very torn. I know a lot of people have been pretty quick to pick Vestavia, and I don't blame them. They look very, very good. I've been torn between them and Baker, to be honest with you. I
Really?
know Baker
Wow.
has, yeah. I mean, when you're hot, you're hot,
Yep.
And so, you got to play the hot hand. So, Baker has looked very good. And if Baker makes it to the semifinals, watch out. You got a hot football team like that, they got to make it there first. They got to take care of Florence. But I'm still picking Vestavia. But don't be surprised if the Hornets make an appearance in Birmingham.
Yeah, no, that's a fun take, and I would probably lean the same, but I do want to add a little addendum there. I want to touch on this hypothetical Thompson Central Phoenix City matchup, which would be a semifinal game to go to the state title. Man, like what else is there to say? You mentioned earlier that this game, if these teams were on opposite sides of the bracket, is probably a state title game, and we have pretty good backing to that claim with what it's been since 2018. The only other team to make a state title appearance since 2018, other than Thompson and Central Phoenix City, has been Auburn, and Thompson has beaten Auburn in all of those matchups. So, man, you could have had Thompson on the other side of the bracket if they had somehow dropped another one of these football games, but they end up winning out. You look at it's very similar to what they did last year. Lost to Grayson, lost to Clay, lost to Hoover, but only one of those losses was a region loss, which means they secure the number one overall seed. Where's the difference between these two football teams right now? We talked about Bobby Coleman in the Phoenix City offense. We talked about Tristan Lyles and Brennan Core and all these key pieces that they have defensively. They've had a hell of a kicking game. Jack Ciancio has done a great job this season. And then you look at Thompson on the other end. It's Trent Seaborn. It's Raja Casey. It's all of these receivers. It's Dedrick Kimbrough, Darion Mosley, Price Lewis. So it's interesting both ways. I think this will be a really even matched game if we do end up getting it. Obviously, this is a hypothetical, but I think it's a hypothetical grounded in years of what we've grown to expect.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch. I'll start with Thompson. Thompson kind of has a feel of like, I'm gonna do my best to describe this. It's kind of like this year, if you watch college football, they kind of feel like this year's Georgia Bulldogs. Teams get up on them early, they lead at halftime, but Mark Freeman is such a good coach. He's got such a good coaching staff around him, and those players all have that championship DNA tattooed into their heart. They know that they could be down 10 points, 13 points at halftime, and they're going to rally and they're going to outscore you in that second half because the second half is where real coaching shows up and you make those adjustments, and that's where ball players come in. So, Thompson, what I worry about is, if they do play Central Phoenix City, no one's really been able to stop Central Phoenix City that isn't a fake high school. So I think, it's just, I wonder if you can get too much in a hole, too early in Central Phoenix City. So that's my concern with Thompson at least. But Trent Seaborn's slinging the rock, so in November, so it's kind of hard to pick against them. And then talking about the Red Devils of Central Phoenix City, they've had a phenomenal year. Like I said, it doesn't feel like anyone outside of like I said, a fake high school has been able to touch them. But Carter Montgomery did put up 35 points. Now, granted, I think only 21 of those came in the first half. I think the other two touchdowns were in uh, GT garbage time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you were there. So
I was there
won't
in
count
spirit.
those.
I
You
was
were.
I was eating chili cheese fries in the press box by the fourth quarter, so wasn't much to see there.
Yeah, but you look, you just look at the defense for Central Phoenix City.
Yeah.
They've given up some points, but
They've
since the month
outscored
of
all their
October,
problems.
yeah, they've outscored 59, 56, 56, 53, 36, 58, 42, 62. You know, their defense struggled at the start of the year. I forgot about that, honestly. They've struggled at the start of the year. I guess that stat that I gave was completely wrong. But sorry about that. I was wrong. I was given wrong information. But since the month of October, they've only given up 12 points. Or that well no, that's even wronger. The point is that the defense of Central Phoenix City is my concern. My concern with Thompson is getting off to too much of a slow start. Like against Central Phoenix City, we see they've already scored 474 points this year.
Yeah.
So but they've also given up 219. So um, I think Thompson's best bet would not to be getting into a shootout against Central Phoenix City because I still want to see their defense, and who knows, Hoover might be able to put some points on them. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
No, that I think that'll be a good tell for what to expect down the line for either of those teams. And we can't rule any of these teams out until the games are played. These are all projections, and we're so happy for all of these high schools for making the playoffs. Because at the end of the day, it is our job to promote the schools, the players, the coaches, all of that fun stuff. That's what we're here to do. And while we make these projections and predictions, we can base it off as many stats as we want. We can base it off as many personal biases as we have. But the games at the end of the day have to be played on a football field for 48 minutes. So, that's what the ultimate determining factor is. We like to take ourselves seriously in these predictions, but at the end of the day, you know what I mean? It still has to be played on a football field. Overall, for me, I'm right there with you. Phoenix City, Vestavia Hills, right now is my projection. If I had to give you a dark horse out of the right side of the bracket, I am going to go Opelika. I think that they can catch fire. I think they have a really good defense, and I think that they've played close enough games with everyone down the stretch to justify that selection. I think Vestavia Opelika would be an excellent semifinal game. And finally, to touch on my opinions on this Thompson Central hypothetical semifinal matchup, I don't know. I can't bet against Mark Freeman in the playoffs. Anybody who's bet against Mark Freeman to make the state title over the past decade, almost decade, has been wrong. Straight up wrong. Since 2018, Thompson has appeared in every single Class 7A state championship. Now, don't get it twisted. Phoenix City has been right there, and they've been the only team to dethrone Thompson on top of the mountain. They've done it twice, once in 2018 under Jamie Dubose, and once in 2023 under Patrick Nix. So if there's any team to do it, it's Phoenix City. And Phoenix City has looked like an absolute buzzsaw this season. I don't want to take anything away from that. They've looked like the best team in Class 7A, really the best team in the state of Alabama, in my personal opinion. And that'll show in our end of season 7 through 5A power rankings. But overall, TP, thank you for joining me. It's been fun to predict these games, fun to project these games. Do you have any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
I think we're in for another fantastic month of November high school football.
That's it. That's all that needs to be said. Until next time, guys, we will be bringing you more of these predictions, more of these previews, and as the 7A through 1A playoffs in the state of Alabama continue, we'll be right here with you. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Bama Preps, on our Twitter/X at Bama Preps FB. And if you're here on the YouTube, you already know where to subscribe. You already know where to hit that button. Go ahead and do it for us. Thank you guys, and we will see you in the next one.